Welcome back to the Rehab Science Podcast, everyone. I am your host, Dr. Tom Walters. Super excited about today's episode. I am joined by fellow orthopedic physical therapist and content creator, Dr. Caleb Burgess. Caleb, thanks for coming on, man.
Nice to be here.
Heck yeah. We were talking about before we got on, you are the biggest content creator. You've got over 1.2 million followers on Instagram. You're the biggest content creator I've had on the podcast. And you're actually the only other person that has their board certification in orthopedic physical therapy. So we have a lot of shared interests. And I'm excited about, of course, talking some about orthopedic physical therapy, but a lot about the interesting things you're doing from a business standpoint, being in that content creation space. So I was talking to you, just before we started. Did you ever think you'd go to physical therapy school and be at a spot doing what you're doing now?
Not even close. Not even close.
Totally. Yeah. When did you, so just a little background, because I don't even know this about you. Where did you go to physical therapy school? How long have you been out? Like, what made you decide to go into physical therapy?
Yeah, so I went to Azusa Pacific University, which a lot of people probably don't know where Azusa is, but it's in the Inland Empire of Southern California. So I played basketball there, and then I kind of had to declare a major my sophomore year, and I was so at that time in my life I was like 19 years old. I was only focusing on like having fun and playing basketball, so I didn't really have any idea. And so I had to like really just take a deep dive and like, what do I actually want to do? And so weirdly enough, I actually chose like a pre-physical therapy major just because I had to choose a major. But as I chose it, I'm like, this seems pretty cool. And then I ended up getting really into all like the undergrad courses and was really didn't realize how much I liked that stuff, just all the sciences, anatomy, physiology, all that kind of stuff. And then I, within that first year, I think towards the end of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year, I kind of was like, oh, this is definitely what I want to do. So that's kind of how it started. And then I ended up going to physical therapy school. So I went undergrad and physical therapy grad school at Azusa. So I was there for like 7 years, which is really cool. And they have a great program.
Did they Oh yeah, no, I remember hearing about them only because I went to Chapman, so I wasn't too far away from you. So, but yeah, otherwise, there's so many PT schools. There's a lot of them you maybe haven't heard of before. I was so similar to you. I actually really disliked high school. I didn't have a great GPA because I just didn't try very hard. I was really focused on my sports, and it wasn't until I got to college and took exercise science classes, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I remember taking anatomy and physiology and sort of becoming obsessed with, but it made sense because in high school I was interested in exercise and like lifting and just all the like boy stuff of like, can I make my muscles bigger? So then it was like you got to the science classes where you actually learned more about exercise science, and I was like, oh, I was totally sold on it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely I was one of those people who would just I would get good grades just because I knew how to like cram and like procrastinate and would just kind of get by with that stuff, but I wasn't like deep dive like totally into it. It was like, okay, I got my good grade, okay, on to the next thing. Obviously that once you get to a certain point in college, you realize like you can still do it to a degree, but it doesn't really translate the same.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's so then you stayed at Azusa, you're there the 7 years, undergrad, do your DPT, and then I know you did a residency in orthopedic physical therapy. Did you do that right away after finishing PT school? Or did you practice for a little bit, or how'd that work?
I went right into it. A lot of the professors that I learned under in grad school were like residency and fellowship trained, like a lot of them. Plus, we would do these things called mentored evals, where like we'd have these mock evaluations on PTs that would come in, and literally like, almost all of them were like, oh yeah, I went through the orthopedic residency and then I went to this like sports fellowship or spine fellowship. So it was like we kind of looked up to these people, and they were really good educators, and you could just tell that they loved what they were doing. So when you're an excited student, you're like, I want to be like that person. And so in our program, a lot of people would go into doing that just because, not that like we felt like we had to, it's just we were so excited to learn more and have that extra knowledge base.
Yeah, and that was the Kaiser Permanente.
Yeah,
was that
Southern California,
and was it
Orthopedic Residency, and then when I did the fellowship They had an orthopedic and sports fellowship, or it's called like orthopedic manual therapy and sports fellowship. And then there was a spine fellowship. And then now they have those two, and they also have a pain, like going to deep dive into like pain sciences and all that kind of stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah. So wait, so how long was all that? I didn't realize you did the fellowship as well.
Yeah.
So was
The
that?
orthopedic residency was a year, and then the fellowship was another year. So the first 2 years after
Oh,
school just
wow.
kind of kept going. And then after that, then there was like this, like, instead of being super busy and exhausted all the time, it was like, oh, I'm just treating patients. And it was like everything slowed down so much,
Yeah.
which was nice for like, as I looked back at this and it's really funny because it was only a period of maybe 5 or 6 months. And then I was like, all right, I got to be doing something else. and then, and then,
Yeah. Yeah. This is too
and then
easy.
I had a colleague that I worked with. So I basically was working like almost exclusively after finishing fellowship. It was like mostly like high school athletes. I mean, I would see a lot of orthopedic patients. So the way that we did it was in the morning, I would see like mostly like general orthopedic population, and the afternoon was like almost all like post-surgical, like ACL, meniscus repairs, labral repairs of the shoulder, like just any sort of like sports injury, a lot of high schoolers. And then one of my colleagues that worked with me in sports was like, he would follow people on Instagram. I wasn't really into Instagram that much at all. And he's like, yeah, all these people are posting this stuff. He's like, and then I would make comments about it sometimes. We'd look at some stuff and he's like, you know what, you should start a page. And I was like, nah, I'm not gonna, there's no way I would ever do that. I literally said that to him joking around. And then after a while I started to realize, and that was at the time, that was like 2017, 2016.
I was just going to
Yeah,
ask what year.
2017.
Yeah.
And I started a page, I think in November 2017, just to kind of like start to look at what people were posting and stuff. And I started to realize, like, you know what? Like, I know a lot of stuff. I should probably start posting stuff just to like get people to kind of learn what I want people to learn that I'm telling people about every day. Like, kind of, I think the same thing probably
Hmm.
for you in a way. It's like you just are like, people need to know this information, and people, you can tell people are starting to engage more with this stuff on social media, and it's becoming more of a thing, like educational content. So I was like, I'm going to start putting stuff out there. And it took me maybe 2 or 3 months of just like watching other pages and seeing what they were doing, seeing what they were saying, what needed to be said that hasn't been said yet, or at least I wasn't aware of, and then kind of coming up with a plan of things I wanted to talk about. And it was really exciting at the beginning because like at this point now, as you probably know, it's like I feel like I've posted about so. I'm like, what do I still post about? It's like it's just basically saying the
Totally.
same
Yep.
things in different ways, which is like hard
Exactly.
sometimes. I'm like, I just want to like post, and I repost a lot of stuff now that I'm like, I don't know how else I
Hmm.
can say this with that kind of.
I do so much of
But
that.
at the same,
People don't go back that far. You go back a year to your content. It's like so people always be like, "Can you cover tennis elbow?" I'm like, "I've covered it 10 times,
exactly.
so I'll bring it back
I
again."
don't know where I was going with that, but like, oh, at the beginning, it was like there you just have this like almost like a blank slate of like I haven't talked, no one has heard me talk about this stuff, so it was like so easy to just constantly pump out new things, even though it was really time consuming. But it was just exciting. It was just like another thing to kind of fill that gap of like I'm not just going to work and seeing patients, which is still awesome, but like I wanted to do something else. And then obviously now
Yeah.
we're looking at what 7 years, 8 years later, it's like crazy what it's become and what my now the fact that I work virtually from home is like there's so many things I'm like this is crazy. I would have never thought to be doing this stuff.
Yeah, no, I love watching your content because you and I are probably the most similar in our sort of like orthopedic approach. I think of anybody else I know online, I think our the way we approach things
Similar.
and the way our posts, I think we're quite similar. And yeah, I was actually really close to about the time frame when you started. I think I started in December of like 2016, and I don't remember how consistent I was at that time. And of course, like the posts and my kind of process has evolved and changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's fun to go back and look at those like early posts, and you know the algorithm's always changing, so it's like you're trying to evolve to
Yeah.
keep up with the algorithm. You know how it goes, but yeah, so many questions about. I think you just have your journey is so interesting. When you were first, so after residency and fellowship, you then go into a regular clinic job, and you said you're there for just a few months before you start kind of exploring this like social media kind of space
Yeah.
more. And a lot of it, we are similar in that I think both of us, it's like you'd have patients come in and tell you things. Sometimes they'd be harmful, kind of like nocivic messages. That was always a frustration for me, like beliefs they'd come in with. And I was like, man, I got to put stuff
Yeah.
out there, or just put out like a post on patellofemoral pain. Like people just need to, it was like I think both of us started in this space of, it was kind of a hobby and just a way to reach more people and help them. It was never at that time, there was never like being a content creator
No.
and having an online business. It just, nobody was talking about that, at least in physical therapy back
Yeah.
then.
For me, yeah, it wasn't really at all about like, I want to have this online business that takes over my normal job. Like, not even close. I mean, in the back of my mind, because I had worked with some people, I think back in 2016, I had some clients or patients that finished and they're like, they're like, I want to keep working out or whatever. And so I would kind of, and this is kind of when online personal training was becoming more of a thing. And so I was always interested in that. I was like, that sounds really cool. Like, I want to like train people, not just physical therapy, but like how to like train for performance and stuff, and having that background in that. I didn't want to like not have that, and I still had it in the sports population, which was cool, but to like kind of just train people and not have to worry about injuries, that was something that was in the back of my head. So I'd help some people with that would pay me on the side, like after they were my patients, and work with them online. So that was kind of in the back of my mind, but I didn't really start making content thinking that, oh, I'm going to build this business of helping people with their training or rehab or whatever. It just, like you said, it was more just like oh my gosh, these messages need to get put out there. Like the information that I read online is like a lot of it's so bad and like outdated and whatever. That's kind of the way that I viewed it too. And what's funny is you said that you started about a year before me, because I remember when I was starting, I think you already had like 100,000 followers. And at that time, 100,000 was like, oh my God. like even having like 10,000 was like, oh, this is like having the K behind your, but you had like 100,000 already.
Exactly.
And I think like the prehab guys had like 250,000 at that time, which at that time they were like on top of like, for physical therapy content, like no one was even close. So, and what's funny is they were like first year students or something. It was crazy.
Exactly. They were just straight out.
Crazy. So anyway, that whole thing was just crazy. And I think that the thing you said about us having similar content, it makes me laugh because like you've probably seen this, like people, the pendulum swings kind of far, and like some people are very like, especially in physical therapy, like the manual therapy versus exercise. And it's like, it's just like you take a side. It's like politics. It's so weird. Whereas like you and me, I feel like, not just you and me, there's other people too, but we're very like, hey, manual therapy can be very helpful, but also you don't need it in a lot of cases. And like, hey, just because you like it and it helps doesn't mean you need it. But if you like it and you can improve your function and like move along with exercise without it being as painful, like why not? You know, which is funny as me, someone who doesn't work with people with my hands anymore, but I still think it's valuable. And I still have clients who will see somebody for that if they really value it. And I have no problem at all. So it's not, you don't have to, like some people that are listening to this, you don't have to pick a side. You can just be eclectic and see the whole big picture and what the evidence shows. So
yeah, I love that you said that. I love that you got into that, because we're so polarized in our profession. There's so much fighting about manual therapy, whether or not you should use it. And yeah, that's another thing I've always liked about your content. Again, coming from that orthopedic manual physical therapy background, you know, you could just see that you integrated both things when it was appropriate. And I'm a lot like you. I used a ton of manual therapy early in my career. I mean, I was in a clinic that's literally people come in and all you did as a PT was 30 minutes of manual therapy with each patient. And they went to an aide and did exercises. We never really did any exercise with them. The PT yourself, you didn't do it. You didn't, it's a big open room so you could kind of see, but yeah, I've used less of it these days, but man, I just don't see the pushback. I understand if you're using manual therapy with a narrative that creates dependency in people, like, of course, like don't do that. And there are some professionals that do that to keep people coming back, and it's extremely frustrating, but neither you or I are operating in that way. So
not at all.
Yeah. How long did it, now that you're full-time online, you know, physical therapy training, how long did it take to make that switch over, to decide to take that leap from like, I'm going to leave in-person patient care? You feel comfortable, like I'm going to make this jump. How long after starting social media, or even after just being a PT, how long did that take?
I think, so there's kind of two ways to answer that. So the first one was like, when do I think I could have made that 100% switch? I probably could have done it in like 2020, 2021. And part of that was kind of artificial because of the pandemic. So it was like I had this huge spike in people I was working with, which basically like my income would have been totally fine for what I wanted at that time. So that's kind of an artificial spike. But even in 2021, like I continued with it, and there was a period in like probably end of 2020, 2021 where my income's the highest it's ever been because I was working full time in the clinic with good pay, and also I had like a full schedule of online clients. I didn't have my app yet, but I mean that combined, and then also my wife was still working a little bit as a nurse. It was like, so money was good, but then I was just exhausted, and I was like, I can't. I don't know how long I can do this for. Plus, I had like a less than 1 year old baby, so it was just crazy. But anyway, at that time, I could have gone out of the clinic, but I didn't really want to, and I also liked the safety net that it provided. Because when you're working online with people, especially, like, I don't take insurance, so it's like everything is like it's all on me. It's like any money that I'm making is from people that are paying me, and I didn't really want to just do that, especially with like a new family and little kids and stuff. So then it came to
and the health insurance. It's like you got to buy your own health insurance. It's like nice to have an employer, and
it's annoying, but that's a whole other topic. But how much you have to pay for that, and how much you actually use it, and anyway. But,
oh my goodness. Yeah.
So then it came to like 2023, and we had a new baby in September 2022, and my wife and I were trying to look to move or get a different place, or whatever. And a lot of people already know this. Like I moved to Colorado in early 2023, and then I don't know if you knew this. I don't know if I told you this, but I was still working per diem in California. Two weekends a month was my minimum. I had to work 4 days a month. So I would fly out for like the first 4 or 5 months I was in Colorado. I would fly out, and then that was like, I'm like, what am I doing? Because I kind of was like, I want to keep this job, and I don't know. I just was like, I really didn't want to burn the bridges.
The stability side of it.
And like if I needed to, I could fly out for a week or whatever. But what's funny is my business was never not doing well. It was just you have dips and stuff, but it was like part of me just wanted to hold on to that. Plus, I also like that's where I always had worked. I felt comfortable. I had friends there. And so then eventually I was like, I mean, my wife were talking about like, this is too hard on our relationship, on everything. Like, I'm going to just stay home. I'm going to totally like stop doing that. I need to get another job in the clinic if I wanted to. I can always do it in Colorado. And the pay isn't the same, but like that wouldn't, again, it's not that big of a deal with the online stuff that I have now. So now, so since July 2023, I've been fully online, but I could have done it in 2021. But from 2021 onward, I was like slowly cutting hours and doing part-time / per diem. And then I think from like 2022 to 2023, I was only working 4 days a month in like either the hospital or the clinic setting. And it's kind of nice to work in the acute care setting sometimes, actually, to be honest, just to kind of like turn my orthopedic brain off and problem-solving brain. Not that you don't, I have huge respect for acute care physical therapists, but like, as far as like the problem solving and physical therapy assessment, like it's way more just functional based and not trying to find all these contributors to pain, and like that doesn't really matter, but just function, which is kind of nice to be in that world and help people in that way too. That was a really long-winded answer. But hopefully people benefit from that.
No, that's good. I had no idea you were flying back and forth and doing all that. Yeah, that's tough with like a young kids and just how busy and sleepless. And I'm sure your wife was like wanting to just
it was tough. She was great, but it was tough with because I had just over 6 month-year-old and like a 2-year-old at that time, and so like to be working throughout the week, like for everything online, and then be like, all right, I'm gone for a couple of days to California. That was rough. But anyway,
I can't give you too much of a hard time because I did a similar thing when my girls are older now. They're 13 and 10, which is just crazy. But when they were about the same age, I was teaching for Red Cord, and I remember because you're in that stage of like, it's kind of exciting to like be kind of going after things and hustling and seeing what you can make happen. And I was flying around and teaching for Red Cord. And I remember Kirsten, it didn't occur to me at the time. I was just enjoying doing it. But sometimes she brings it up. She's like, yeah, I was really stressed out because you were leaving and teaching these classes. So
I'm sure.
Oh man. But I think I'm glad you shared kind of the details on that. Cause I think a lot of people, there's this idea of like practitioners who are in the clinic, but they see so many other people out there, other practitioners starting online kind of side hustles, virtual side
Yeah.
hustles, and kind of hearing how you did it is nice to know, because there is that spot where you kind of have to take the leap of faith. And entrepreneurial journeys, you talk to enough entrepreneurs, like the income isn't always stable.
Yeah.
You have dips, and you have to be you kind of have to train yourself or get conditioned to be okay with that a little bit, because you can have those periods. Like, I don't know, for me, I always feel a little bit of this underlying
Yeah.
stress of like, I've got to make things
Yes,
happen.
always. We would never
Totally.
trade it. Like as you probably know,
Yes.
like it's amazing the amount of freedom that we have. But I hate when people make it sound like not just physical therapy or personal training, but anything online business, entrepreneurship. Like they make it sound like it's like, oh, everything's like so amazing and there's no stress, and like there's so many things that I would much rather be in the situation I'm in now, but at the same time, like you do have that underlying kind of like anxiety to a degree, and like sometimes you have to grind, and sometimes you're losing sleep and whatever. So it's not like all this like rainbows and butterflies. It can be difficult, but it's definitely worth it. And sometimes I do miss sometimes just going to see patients from a set period of time. I can go home and I just unplug and not have to worry about anything and watch a movie. And now I'll be like, sometimes I'll be up at like 10, like making a new program for a client, or making a new program for my app or something, or making a new post. And like,
Totally.
it's not always fun doing that. But at the end of the day, the
Hmm.
grand scheme of thing is definitely worth it.
It's
And like you
amazing.
said, like I
Yeah.
think people sometimes think too, it's like you're all in the clinic or you're all, and it's like I think the best way to go for most people is to do, if you want to transition to something, you should do it like a side hustle, and it's not your main thing. And
Hmm.
as it builds, then you find ways to cut back. And then you will have to make the leap at some point, potentially. But sometimes you just keep the side hustle as a side hustle indefinitely, and that's okay too. I think,
Yeah.
and a lot of people didn't even realize when I was still in the clinic that I was still in the clinic. I have to like remind people, like, did you actually see patients in person? Like I was a fake physical therapist or something. I'm like, I do. I've
Yeah,
been doing this
totally.
since the beginning. I actually am trying to get out of that because it would make it much easier to do what I'm doing online. But I think
Hmm.
people think there's this whole like, what's the phrase, like burn the ships or whatever. You do have to do that sometimes at some point if you want to make that leap. But a lot of times there's this really slow transition where you're kind of doing both things, and that's okay. And I think it's probably the safest route to go if you want stability too. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I hear a lot of people, kind of implementing a model like that, where they kind of slowly cut down their clinical hours as they kind of, if they want to make that side hustle their full thing, or like you say, you could just keep it as like a side hustle, and it's a little extra income stream.
Yeah.
I agree with you on there's definitely times, especially because I was in this teaching job for a lot of years, and that was nice because, the academic schedule is not the same as a full-time physical therapy schedule.
Yeah.
It's like everybody knows, like when you're in college, it's like you got a class for an hour and then you got 2 hour, 3 hour break, or you got one class today. And so it was amazing when I was there. I was there for 10 years because it allowed me to really build rehab
Yeah.
science in the hours I wasn't teaching or prepping. But the amazing thing was I had health insurance, and I had the stability of like every 2 weeks I got this paycheck. I could count on it with the same amount every two
Yeah.
weeks. And when I decided to leave that job, it definitely kicked in that like, oh, like that's realization of like the marketing and growth and income is all up to my efforts now. And there's nobody else that's going to be, I just can't count on that stability. And there was definitely a part of me that was like, you can see there was a temptation of like, maybe I'll just go back to a clinic job and just have that stability. But then I'm so grateful for this side, like you were saying, because being in the entrepreneurial side, because even though it has that kind of instability and a little bit of anxiety of having to keep things going, the freedom and autonomy that comes with it is just, for me, is so huge. I'm not a great employee. I don't really like working for other
Me
people and
neither.
being on someone else's schedule. My number one value is like freedom and
Yes.
autonomy. So I'd never change this, but it is frustrating when people think that it's just like all awesome and easy,
Yeah.
and
Or like you're just
it's
like, it's not even just the awesome and easy, but like almost like we're just not working as hard or something. It's like
oh sure,
it,
yeah, especially when you work from home. People like, I've had people
yeah.
like, they're like, do you even
You're
work?
like, what?
And I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, I never stopped
It's like
thinking
all
about
I'm
this.
doing all day. It's like you lose sleep because you're working or you're thinking about something.
Mhm.
Or like even like we talked about this, I think we've messaged about this, like posting at certain times. Like I will many times, even still sometimes I'll miss breakfast because it's when the kids are eating, and I need to like get my post up. it's like, it's
Exactly.
like you can't really get around. I mean, you can technically like schedule your post. I never really have had much faith in
I didn't
that.
either.
So, and my
Mm-hmm.
wife, we've been doing this for long enough. She like gets it. But there are some days where like
Yes.
I will try my best to like, okay, I'm just gonna post real quick and not engage. I'm like, let's have Sunday breakfast or do these things
Mm-hmm.
together. And but like you said, the freedom is amazing because like even like
Mm-hmm.
last week we went to Vail and we got to see like the fall leaves and there's no like I don't have to worry about putting in for PTO. Like I can just work harder
Yes.
around that to make up for any hours that I missed or sometimes if we go on trips I might do some work on the trip and it's all on me so we can do whatever we want when we want, which is a huge thing. But it's not easy. People think it's just like, oh, I'm just taking
Yes.
time off. So no, it takes a lot of
Yeah.
work on the front and back end, and sometimes in the middle to have that happen. But the fact that
Yes.
we can do that is so cool.
It's like they say about entrepreneurs. Your brain never, I think when you have a job where you work for someone else, you can leave the job and turn your brain off. But I think when you have your own entrepreneurial thing, you're kind of thinking about it all the time. Your brain doesn't really turn off. Even when you're on vacation, you have to be much more disciplined about, I am not going to work on this right now because your temptation is to be thinking about it and working about on it all the time. And it's,
Yes.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I think one of the major things that's helped me over the years is one, like being really passionate about orthopedic physical therapy and about exercise and just like loving the information, enjoying teaching. But I think also maybe a little bit of OCD, a little bit of obsessive compulsive kind of tendencies. I had some of that in high school, and I'm always talking to my wife about it. It definitely helps me in this world because, like you said, you've got to, like, if you're going to do well on these platforms, you have to kind of play the game and like follow the rules. And it's like I get up every morning the
Yeah.
same time, I post the same as you, and my kids are having breakfast and we're getting ready for school. My wife just knows
Yeah.
now. Like I remember for years when it was like a hobby, she was like so frustrated. But
It's
now that it's
exactly
like
the same.
actually a business, she gets,
My
yeah.
wife was like, "What? Why do you
She
have to
like
do that?" I'm like,
actually she's
"Because you don't
supportive now.
understand. Like, I have to post this time, or my post is gonna tank." And she's like, and it sounds so
Yes.
stupid to people who hear this thing like a post. Like, who cares? It's like, no, no, this is a business. This is I want people to get this message. I
Yes.
want them to see it. And like you said, and eventually they got to the point where like, okay, this is just a thing now. This is what we do.
Yes. Once it makes like enough money and they see that it's a real job, then they're okay with you posting in the
It's
mornings.
so funny.
Yeah, yeah, it's so yeah, with the on, you and I have DM'd a little bit over the years. With your online, I remember talking to you about how many clients you had at one point and just how busy you were. And it sounded like it was really pretty, like you were spending a lot of time, like you had your weekly calls and check-ins with people, and then you were building programs for them. How many hours in a week are you spending working like one-on-one with people now? Well, I guess what does your day look
So
like?
it's super variable. So I mean,
Mm,
technically, if I had like everything down to like a science of like a calendar of like a content schedule and like a schedule I'm working with my client, like I would know all these hours and stuff, but it's totally variable depending on how many people I'm working with at the time, what projects I'm working on. I'm cutting back from clients that I'm working with, I'm adding, I'm growing that, whatever. But typically, and this has changed over the years many times, but at this point, what I do is I have, if it's someone's like a new client, I can get on an assessment with them, which can be anywhere from 45 minutes to like an hour and 15 minutes, sometimes a little bit more, but typically around that range. So that's just variable depending if I onboard a new person or not. That
mhm.
just totally changes all the time. Then at the end of the month, I have a call with a client, it's anywhere from like 15 to 30 minutes to like reassess the following month. Sometimes if somebody's having setbacks or a hard time, I might get on a quick phone call or video call. It's not really included in what I usually give people, but I also want people to know that like I can get on a call if I need to, if I have the availability. So that's just here and there. But typically Monday, Wednesday, Friday, what I do is I actually follow up with all of my online clients that I'm working with. They'll send me messages on WhatsApp, voice messages, video, text, whatever. And that's a day where like I'm responding to everybody in my working hours, which is
Got it.
typically at my time and anywhere between like 10 a.m. and like 3 or 4 p.m. So before it
Yeah.
was like I would just try to get back to people within the day or within 2 days max. That's I was doing that for years, and then the last few
Mm,
months I realized like, you know what, it makes sense for me to have more of these days where I'm not responding to people, because if it's a day in between, most people are okay from that day. I want them to have the support,
Yeah.
but I think Monday, Wednesday, Friday works the best. And so I tell people, you can message me at
Mm-hmm.
2 in the morning on a Saturday. My notifications are off. I don't care. You can message me whenever, whatever you want to talk about. I will get back to you on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, though, no matter what.
Monday
And
one.
people know when
Yeah.
I'm getting back to them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really cool. Um,
That's a good boundary, like a good setup for
yeah,
you.
it made a lot of sense when I made that change, which took me 7 years to but I mean I used to respond to people like right away the day of all the time, and that was just I was going crazy, and then it turned into like okay within a day or two, and then but then some people would be like, oh, why are you not getting back to me? So now they know exactly when I'm going to be getting back to them, which works really well. As far as like making content and planning content, I'm not the best with that, so I will be like usually like the night of before the next day, or like
You and I
that
are so
morning, I'll ask my
similar.
wife, like, hey, I got to post it in like 30 minutes to an hour. Like, I need to figure out if I'm making a new one or if I'm reposting something, if I need to change the caption, if I need to change a few videos, if I need to have a different call to action. So, like, I would say this is embarrassing, but like 80% of the time now, or 90% of the time, it's me just like on the fly, like, what am I going to repost or post really quick? Every once in a while, I have a little extra time on my hand, which is actually exciting to like, I mean, that used to be like all the time, but now it's like, okay, this is something I need to talk about, or I need to remake a post about this and refilm some videos, and I'll have some time to do that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then everything else is kind of like miscellaneous, like getting through emails, responding to comments or DMs. I try to limit myself on like I'll set a timer for like 10 or 15 minutes. Like I'm just going to respond to comments for 15 minutes, or I'm going to respond to a DM
Yeah.
for DMs for like 20 minutes or whatever. And then I'll just kind of that time, once the timer goes off, I'm like done for the day, because it would just take up too much time to constantly do that throughout the day. I will try to have
Mm-hmm.
at least a few stories I post up every day. I have like these daily to-dos that I try to get done whenever.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is kind of variable. And that's kind of the cool thing about this entrepreneurship journey is like, I don't have this, like I have some stability in what I'm doing and some repetition in the things I'm doing every day. But a lot of it is kind of just like, I fit things in when I think makes sense, which is cool because
Mm-hmm.
not any day looks exactly the same, which is pretty cool. And then
Yes.
sometimes I have like projects where like I have a new routine or a new program I'm making for my app, which might
Yeah.
take some time or may take a week or a few days of like dedicated work. Or I'm working with a brand that I really like and I have a post that I'm making for them and I'm getting paid for that. So I need to like have a deadline that I'm finishing that at. Um,
Would that be on a Tuesday or Thursday, those
yeah,
kind
so
of things?
typically, like actually, Mondays I stopped taking calls. So Mondays, even though I'm getting back
Mm.
to my clients, I also take that day
Yeah.
as like I'm not taking any calls from clients, which that can take up a
Mm-hmm.
decent amount of time if I have like a full schedule of like booked appointments. So that's a time where I can
Mm.
get a lot of stuff in, or I can plan out my week better. Which is also something I only added in the
Yeah.
last few months. I used to have like a hey, if I have an opening, I have an opening. But now it's like I know Mondays are like I don't have anything scheduled. It's more like I just got to fit in what
Mm-hmm.
I can and also help plan out the week. But yeah, usually Tuesdays and Thursdays are when I'll spend more time doing that other stuff or making
Yeah.
content or whatever.
That's one of my favorite things about kind of running my own business is just that the schedule changes every week and every day is different. And I operate a lot like you, where I kind of put things in at different spots, sort of when I feel motivated to do them, which I love that because sometimes when you feel forced to do something that's on the schedule, you kind of dread doing it. At least I'm
I am
that way.
too.
And if I can rather kind of do it when I feel motivated, I'll have such better energy for it, especially if you have to be in front of a camera and
Yeah.
have that kind of put in some of that energy to filming something. So I, for me personally, that was one of the hard things about the clinic life was kind of the monotony of it. I had a really hard time just like, not only am I introverted, but also, so that was exhausting
Oh
talking to
yeah.
people all day, but then just kind of felt like I was doing the same thing all the time. So then I knew I loved education, and getting to the academic setting was amazing because every semester
Yeah.
changed, and that was one of the things I loved about being in college was just that it was always changing. And it took me a long time to kind of figure that out about myself. But that's one of my favorite things now is just being able to kind of move things around and do them when I feel like it. Do you ever feel like, you hear sometimes people talk about trying not to have any white space in their calendar, like having something in there and have it always like being like, there's all these podcasts and people out there talking about productivity and how to be more productive. Do you ever, and as an entrepreneur, sometimes you can kind of, they'll talk about, sometimes you can kind of put yourself create your own jail for yourself
Yeah.
because you are filling every little space and taking on so much. I know at one point you were pretty exhausted doing both the like regular clinic work
Yeah.
and your online business. Do you ever run into that now that you're just doing all online in your app? Do you ever get to where like you're feeling exhausted, like your bandwidth, like you don't have any more bandwidth, like you're spread too thin, you're just doing too
Yeah,
much?
it kind of comes in waves, where like there's times where like I just know I wake up and I'm like I just feel like so like mentally like let's go, and I get so excited. And it typically is after I've had a day or two or three or a little trip or something where I kind of unplugged, or at least to a degree, not 100%, but like I just did a lot less. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
super important, is to kind of like you kind of have to like fill up your creativity motivation well before you can like start dumping that water back out on what you're
Yeah.
doing, because there is this kind of, because it is all on you, there is kind of this like thought process like I always have to be doing something, and I get caught up in that like all the
Yeah.
time. But it's weird, it's like sometimes having just opening is nice, but then sometimes that almost like stresses me out because you're like I could be doing stuff like you said. And if I have it scheduled, not scheduled, but just in my thought, like, oh, today we are doing this with friends, or today we're going out and doing this thing that has nothing to do with work, and I want to be totally focused on just doing this thing. I think knowing that ahead of time does help some of that stress and anxiety, because you're not just constantly feeling you need to do something because you already know something's planned there. So I think
Yeah.
I probably gravitate, compared to me maybe 10, 15 years ago, I gravitate more to having something in my schedule, even if it's not work, just to know that it's there,
Mm-hmm.
that I need to take that time, versus just having it open
Yeah.
and then being like, what are we doing? Like, and that can kind
Totally.
of be stressful at times. But yeah, I kind of, I bounce back and forth between this, like, sometimes I like having this schedule that's more repetitive because it feels nice to have some stability of what I'm doing and knowing what I'm doing. But then also then sometimes that gets exhausting, and I'm like I want to just be able to like do fill things in where I want. And then if I do that, sometimes I start to like get off the rails, because I've said this before on a few podcasts, I think, but I think I have undiagnosed ADHD. Like I never actually got it diagnosed, but like it's very, I read all about it, and like every little thing I click, and my wife's like, yeah, you totally have it. So what happens is like I go
Yeah.
through this like weird, like if I don't have the schedule, then I won't get anything done sometimes. But then if I do, sometimes I'm like, oh, this is boring, and I want to feel it. And so that
Mm-hmm.
change is really cool, but I also like to have, and I know it's like I tried to like, okay, what's the thing that'll work for me all the time? And I feel like just having change is what helps. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes more of a schedule,
Yeah.
sometimes less of a schedule, but definitely it's nice to recharge the battery sometimes and plan time that I'm not doing anything. And it's really nice to do that
Yeah.
sometimes.
It's amazing how many similarities we have. The podcasts are so fun because you actually get this chance to, you and I have DM'd and had little, voice memos sent back and
Yeah.
forth, but to actually get to kind of hear how your brain works and what you're working on, it's amazing how similar we are. And it makes you wonder, like, I'm sure different personality tests or whatever, it'd be interesting to look at where people score and
Yeah.
what personality traits line up with who kind of takes on these types of like moves into like entrepreneurship or something. What would you say, like, so many people are interested? We were talking about, I just saw this thing the other day that said it was looking at the top kind of professions or industries for potential growth, and coding was number one, but then content creation was number two. And you and I were talking about so many new grads now, just think about this, they come out of school, like out of physical therapy school, like just want to get into the content creation space. What do you think are some personal traits for you or characteristics that have made you successful in like growing your audience and building a business like this? Like, what is it about what you do or your habits that makes you successful?
I think part of it is just knowing that like kind of what I said at the beginning with the whole like doing the residency and the fellowship, and then having that gap of like I'm just working in the clinic, which again, I'm not knocking anybody who likes to do that. It's totally fine. But for me, I just felt like, oh, I got to be doing something else. So I think just having
Mm,
that like passion for what we do has been super important. Like I really love what I do. Like it's not like yes, you can have times where you're burnt out or whatever just because it turns into work. But like at the end of the day, I most of the time I'm like really excited about talking when I'm talking about, or helping people understand things, or just communicating with people on a personal level, like sending them messages or voice messages on DMs, or my clients that I work with. Like I do love it. So I think that is probably a big part of it, and that comes across is I think most of us who do
Hmm.
this don't like do it because we're like, I just want to grow a business. Like we really are into what we do. I think that's a huge part of it. And then I think
Yeah.
also, again, maybe just people who tend to gravitate towards my stuff is I don't, and I understand if you're playing the algorithm game and stuff on social media, it's better if you take these really hard stances. But I think people who do follow me or you like
Hmm.
the fact that we provide this like nuance and like not these super hard stances on things, which in a weird way, the following that you have won't usually be as dedicated to like being into the
Sure.
things you post because
Yeah.
they're not as tribal. But I think those people
Yes.
tend to think the same way. They're kind of like, hey, well, I kind
Hmm.
of like the fact that you said this thing, but you also said like, hey, in some cases this or whatever.
Hmm.
I think that's probably something that a lot of people do like that follow me for my content.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's
Yeah.
others that don't like that. They're like, I want you to take a hard stance on something. It's like my hard
It's
stance is
true
that
when
you
you're
can't
kind of
take hard
tribal
stances
and
usually. That's my hard stance.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. You and I are both in the it depends
Yeah. And I
category.
think more people probably are. It's just that the people
Hmm.
that gain very big followings or have these really like polarizing personalities that people are aware of, it seems like
Hmm.
everybody's polarizing, but it's like probably most people aren't. It's just that most
Hmm.
people that have a bigger following have a bigger people of that are like almost like tribal and that are like would back those people
Hmm.
in anything they said. So then they get this huge presence and personality, and
Yeah.
so you'll see more of those people. Kind of like when you even like politics or things that like you
Exactly.
will see these people. You think everybody who's on one side of a political spectrum is like that, when in reality it's just those
Hmm.
polarizing people that tend to be the loudest and tend to be kind of the craziest online. But most of us are probably not like that.
In the
Yeah,
middle, where like most people are actually kind of in the
yeah,
middle and go this direction on this
yeah.
thing and this direction on the other thing. Yeah, I agree. I think um, I I've thought about these types of like what helps encourage success when you want to kind of get into the online space and content creation. And I think two of the things you said, like you got to really love it, like you got to be passionate about it because you do have to kind of be obsessive and want to be thinking about this all the time.
Yeah.
And I think having like the education, like you went through a residency, a fellowship, you practiced before you started this, like there's all of that education that laid the foundation. Like you had a great knowledge set, you are passionate about it. And then do you feel like, I always think there's a certain amount of there's obviously like a certain amount of discipline of like where you have to be doing this thing all the time to kind of stay
Mhm.
relevant in terms of the algorithms and on the platforms. Were you a pretty disciplined person like in high school with sports or just growing up? Like, are you somebody who, if you decide you're going to do something, you'll just kind of stick to it?
Yeah. So again, it kind of goes back to the whole like ADHD thing. Is like I think when I'm
Oh,
really passionate about something, I get like obsessive over it, and then if I'm not
yeah.
really into it, I won't be at all. And but the
Yeah.
weird thing is, I
Yep.
think part of it is probably like parenting too. Like, not really my dad as much. My mom was a lot more like, like if you're gonna do something, you have to do your best, and like there's that pressure. And I think there's aspects of that that aren't good, but there's aspects of that that just kind of
For
like
sure.
make you hard. Like there's subjects I hated, but I would still get an A in because I
Hmm.
wanted to get good grades because I was supposed to get good grades. you know. But I know there's a lot of people that
Yeah.
are different than me that they were kind of like, oh, I wasn't interested in this thing, so I got a C, I passed, I got a D, whatever. It doesn't really affect their life in any way growing up, but and they just
Mm-hmm.
crushed the things they were into. I think my
Yeah.
personality was I would do well on everything just because I was supposed to, but I
Got
wasn't
it.
really into it. I would get obsessive
Yeah.
about sports that I really liked, and just like working really hard and that kind of stuff. And then when I found out what my profession was going to be, I got like obsessive with that. And I think, yeah, I think
Hmm.
that really does help with content creation too, is if you're somebody who just like has this drive of like, and also not even just the making the content and liking it. It's more like, I was like, if I'm going to, I remember, I still remember this like as like a core memory, like thinking of like, I'm going to start making content and thinking to myself, do I really want to do this? because because I knew I was like, if and all the things I've read about it, following people like you, and I think like at the beginning it was like Teddy was on there a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
what's his name? Oh my gosh,
Jacob
Jacob. Yeah, yeah. So there's like maybe
Harden.
like just a
Yeah.
core
Yeah.
group of you guys who were like doing really well. I
Mm-hmm.
remember watching you guys. I'm like, they post every single day, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and the quality of their post is really good, and I'm like, to be able to do this it's going to take a huge.
Yeah.
I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to be doing this foreseeably for the rest of my life if this is how it goes. Do I really want to do this? And I remember thinking, like, yeah, I want to do this.
Yeah.
But I also was like super nervous and like, how much sleep am I going to lose? And I lost a lot of sleep beginning because everything you make is brand new, and I had to try to keep up with like I got to post every
Sure.
day. I can't repost people because no one knows who I am. I have to post every single day. It's got to be
Mm-hmm.
high quality. So that first year or so was like really rough, and I don't think people understand
Yeah.
that like I think it's easier now to go like viral and not have to have that.
Sure.
But back then it was more about consistency, getting someone else to share your stuff or whatever, or interacting with people, making relationships. And I think just being okay with how much of a grind it was going to be. I just had to make the decision and then go for it. And that was really
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Those are such.
And I thank God I did not have kids at that time. But I
Oh
remember
yeah.
staying up at like
Yeah.
3 a.m. trying to make a logo, like trying to think of what I was going to post, and consistently staying up until the wee hours of the morning and getting like a couple hours of sleep before going into the clinic because I had to finish a post because I needed to post at 6 a.m. like and crazy
Yeah.
things like that, or like being at the gym after work, or even in work and telling my buddy like, hey, I was like doing an ACL class. I'm like, hey, can you watch them for a second? I got to post. He's like, really? I'm like, I have to post because I used to post at 6
Yeah.
p.m. and it was like I'd be in the middle of
Oh
like
yes, I
ACL
remember.
classes. So
Yeah.
I would literally ask him like, can you watch them for like 5 minutes? Just gotta get this up real quick. And I'd be super stressed out.
Yeah.
So people don't understand like how much of a commitment and time it can be. And
Those are such great insights. I think for anybody thinking about getting into this, like what you did there of doing some research on like what are other accounts out there doing, and I think such a big one is going into it with the mindset of this is a marathon,
yeah,
and am I okay with doing this for the long term? And in the beginning, I don't think I had quite the same amount of stress you did, but I think I probably actually didn't do as much research as you. And I just started
yeah,
posting, and that probably protected me a little bit from stress because I didn't have because it was just like Doc Jen and
oh yeah,
Vinny
Dr.
and
too, yeah,
Jacob. Yeah. Like I kind of I saw how big their following was, and I was like, wow, that's impressive. I'll never get there. I kind of thought like that'd be crazy to ever be that size, but I didn't look too much at their posts, which I think kind of protected me because I think if I had, I would have thought what you did, like, oh, I have to be at this caliber
yeah.
and kind of create this thing, and but I think that side of because I'm very similar to you, I will be obsessed about things when I'm interested in them, and if I'm not interested in it, I just don't really care. And I've always kind of attributed there's like kind of bipolar disorder in my family, and I kind of have these pendulum swings where like I'm kind of manicky and obsessed about things, and then I'll wake up one day and I'll be like, why am I doing any of this? It's horrible. But I know now that about myself, and I just like push through, even if
Yeah.
do you, you know, oh man, there's so many things I'd want to ask you about this. Do you, just out of curiosity, like, when you were talking about kind of scheduling, kind of having that, like the mix of having things hard scheduled and then kind of have some freedom to move things around, you and I both posting every day in the morning, like I know on Sunday I'm going to be at Disneyland all day with my girls, but I know like I always think of my posts. They go to bed at night and then I figure out what the post is for the
Yeah.
next day. It's just, I think you and I have been in this long enough. We have it's easier for us to, I think your processes just over time become a little bit more efficient, and you have so much
Yeah.
content that you can go back and repurpose or kind of change things a little bit. So I'll think of things at night after they go to bed. I'll be like, okay, what is tomorrow? What am I
Yeah.
going to do? But like I know for Sunday, I'll still do a post in the morning before we go out, but I'll just be on there
Yeah.
less, like responding to comments or DMs or anything like that. I have noticed there have been times where I've just decided like I'll just take a day
Yeah.
off and not post, and then I kind of miss not having it that day. Like I kind of it almost feels like a little bit of
Oh
anxiety.
yeah.
I don't know if it's like this thing the app like doing this for so long has
Oh
created that
yeah.
if I don't do it that day, later in the day I'll be kind of bummed that I didn't put a post
I
up.
think it's part of it's like a dopamine hit because it's like because if
Yeah.
a post is doing well and you're getting that daily and you're like, okay, things are still growing. I'm still reaching the same amount of people I want to reach.
Yeah.
And again, some people who don't understand this world, it's going to sound really weird. We sound crazy saying this stuff, but like, I think too, like, and it's weird because I know people who do really well who post like every 3 days. But what's weird is if I don't post for a day, no matter what, every time I've done the same thing where I'm just exhausted, I'm like, screw this, and I feel amazing initially, but then I post the next
Mm-hmm.
day, and I know it's a post that I know will probably do well. Just from doing this long enough, you usually know what will do well, what's going to be like, it's going to be
Yes.
an okay
Yep.
post, but I still want to talk about it. The next day, the post will be like 50% less engagement than it's almost like you get penalized. Like, well, you usually post every day and you did it now. So I think that's where for me, that like kind of stress comes in of like, okay, it's nice to not post, but I'm like, oh, I know I have to kind of like build this up again, which is weird. Has
Mm-hmm.
I know some people who can post every 3 or 4 days and their posts always
I
do well.
know.
And I'm like, why does that happen for them and not
I
for
know. It's
me?
like somehow they're in the algorithm and it knows what
Maybe
they
it's
do
that
or
pattern they're
something.
used to. And then I started to try
Mm-hmm.
to do that for a week or two, and it just tanked so bad, like everything. And I was like, I got to get back to doing it every single day. But I think part of it is
I
that
know.
that I think it's the nice to know people are liking this, people are getting help from this, they're saying that it
Mm-hmm.
helped them. I think there's that just a human nature that we like to see that we're helping people and we're reaching a lot of people. And then also like even days where I post and it doesn't do well, or like for whatever reason their Instagram's updating things and everybody's post is not doing well, or
Yeah. It kind of bums you though. Yeah. 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 No, it bums you out a little bit. It just got a little quieter. Yeah. I can still hear you the whole time. It's just got a Oh, yeah. Oh, there's better. I think
I'm
it
so
just turned
sorry
it back
about
a little
that.
louder.
But
No
anyway, I was
worries.
just saying, like, yeah,
Yeah.
so like those days it doesn't do as well. It's like I almost get upset at myself for even thinking this, but I'll kind of get like down, and I get in like kind of a weird mood, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, why am I doing this? It's one post, like I've been posting for, but it's that
Mm-hmm.
expectation of like I want it to reach this many people. I want to know that I'm making a difference, and so sometimes when you don't, that's why I really feel for people who have like smaller accounts who are trying to do this stuff, and like they'll have like no comments or like barely any likes, and like they're doing
Mm-hmm.
this for a long time, and I'm like, God, that's rough because I almost forgot what that felt like. And again, I'm not saying this from like
Yeah.
I'm better than you. I'm just saying I
Sure.
can, that's got to be really rough. And I think that's why a lot of people end up going like, what,
Mm-hmm.
screw this after a year. Like I can't do this anymore. I totally get it because I feel like that
Yeah.
sometimes if I have a few days in a row where I'm getting still thousands of likes, but not what I expect. So I think people don't realize we all kind of go through that even at different levels in the
Mm-hmm.
social media content game.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like we all, I think as humans, kind of thrive on growth and seeing things do better over time. And I agree with you. I will have, if a post doesn't do well, and I, like you all know, oh, this post probably isn't going to do that great. This one will do better. And you kind of, you've seen the patterns long enough, you know, kind of how things are going to do. But then if something does worse than you expected, you will feel kind of bummed out. And it took me a lot of years to not kind of take that
Yeah.
personally and just kind of start to realize like, there are things about the algorithm that I
Yeah.
can't predict, and who knows why something it was still good information. I don't know why today it didn't do
Yeah.
well. And it's weird. Sometimes things will do well like a few days
Yeah.
after
It's
they
really
were
weird.
posted. Like they won't it used to be instant,
Yes.
and now sometimes I'll notice like a reel won't take off right away or won't even get that
Yeah.
many likes, but it'll get a ton of views a week or so
Yeah, the
after
reels are really
it's
weird.
been up.
I
Like
never got really into the reels
it's
as much. I still do
yeah.
sometimes, but I I rarely do them. But like you said, like randomly a month later, something will like just take off, and I'm like, what in the world? Like, why am
Yeah.
I getting all these followers? Where are these comments coming from? And I have to check it. Like that's
Yep.
so freaking weird. And I don't know and I don't know if someone shared
Yep.
it or if the algorithm's just like, let me pick that one today. Like I have
Yeah.
no idea. It's
It's hard to figure out. I just am like I kind of have I've gotten a little less I know there's actually a book out there it's called Scarcity Brain by Michael
Mm,
Easter, and it's all about how social media platforms some of the research and how they operate is based on casinos, and
really.
kind of giving you hits but then not giving you hits and sort of keeping you like a slot machine, kind of
That makes
keeping
perfect
you
sense.
engaged because some and I see it more and more now. So I think realizing that and hearing some of that, him talk about that in that book, helped me actually let these things. They don't affect me emotionally as much
Yeah,
anymore. I'm like, whatever. It's
it is what
just
it is.
today is just how this day played out. Yeah, it is. It is what it is. So, man, I don't. I want to be respectful of your time. This turned into a huge content creation episode, and people are probably like, "Was there any physical therapy in there?" But I think like I said, I was just super excited to talk to you because you do have the biggest social media account of anyone I've talked to, and the fact that you transitioned to a full online business. I think there's so many insights
Yeah.
here that I wanted to pick your brain about, and I think will be super helpful, especially to practitioners who listen to this podcast or anyone that's thinking about maybe have taken a swing at the content creation space or thinking about maybe picking up some online training or physical therapy clients. I think this is really helpful for people to hear your journey and just some of the insights you shared on what you got you to this level of success and what you're doing. I know we talked about your the online practice, and I know we didn't talk, you'd mentioned the app, we didn't talk about it a lot. If people did, I know I've sent people to you over the years, if people wanted to come work with you or look more at your products and services, where would they go?
So they can just go on my Instagram page or my website. But to be honest, my website is just kind of like pushing you to to. I mean, it's really just to have a website. It's not like it has a lot of stuff on
Sure.
there. So I mean, really, if they go to my Instagram page, you can just click on the link and you can apply to work with me if I have a spot available, if you're a good fit. Because I try to screen people if like, I don't know if you'd be the best fit, or I don't have a spot right now, you can go on a wait list or whatever. So sometimes people laugh at like, I have to apply to work with you. And it's like, it's not just like when you have that many people that reach out, I need to kind of like make sure that you're the right fit. And I have the spots because I'm only one person. I don't have like a whole team that's working with people. And then they can
Yeah.
also, they can have a free trial to the app for 7 days. And then the app is honestly pretty cheap. It's $15.
What is that? And is the
Yeah, it's
app
$15
like,
for,
do you
huh?
go in and, oh, sorry, go ahead. It's
Oh, it's
$50.
$15 for a month, and then it's
15.
99 for the whole
Uh-huh.
year.
Got
So
it.
and that includes like 10 programs, 25 sections covering the whole body with different routines, like educational stuff. So like comparatively to other people that are in my position that have apps and programs, not that I'm like saying mine's better or anything. There's other ones that are great, but I mean the value you get for how much you're paying is kind of ridiculous, to be honest. But I
Yeah.
wanted to make it so that most people can have access to something that they can pay for other than just my page, and I don't feel like budget's going to be an issue. So
Yeah.
those are the two things that they can do, or just send me a DM or an email would work too.
Mm.
Yeah.
In the app, is it mostly geared at people with a diagnosis, like a pain or an injury, or could it be that and also just general training? Like I just want to strengthen my
Yeah, I mean,
shoulder.
it's mostly geared towards people who have some sort of issue, like painful issue, or
Mm-hmm.
they're a nagging pain or injury that they're trying to recover from, that they feel like they can kind of navigate through somewhat of a guided routine. Somewhat meaning like I put it together based on patterns I've seen, but it's not like obviously it's not individualized. I can't make individualized. It's a one to many.
Sure.
But there are also things in there where you can view it as like a prehab or like mobility things if you want to work on mobility. I do have a program that's for just general strengthening for like beginner to intermediates for like a full body strengthening
Mm-hmm.
program. I probably will start adding in a lot more. I have 2 full body mobility programs, so that's for anybody who's not even injured or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll probably add in some more just like strengthening training stuff over time. But that I think most people don't follow me for that, so I wanted to make sure I was kind of targeting what I think most people follow me for and would benefit and want to kind of look to get help with from me. But I probably will add in some more like actual training stuff later on. Like, hey, you don't have an issue, but like here's how you get stronger with this,
Mm-hmm.
or your performance improves with this, or whatever.
Yeah. So it's kind of structured almost in a way, kind of like your Instagram page, but just more
Yeah, more
comprehensive.
comprehensive and more like guided. Like, here's how many reps you do. Here's this exercise,
Got
and
it.
like a full breakdown, either through voiceover or information of like
Oh,
this is exactly how you perform this exercise. Almost like if I was giving somebody a personal client or seeing somebody in person, like making sure that they're doing everything the best way that they
mm-hmm.
possibly do. How to kind of modify something if needed. Whereas like typically at least my content now is more like here's exercises you can do, but I'm not going to go into like all the nitty gritty of every single exercise. Whereas as you probably remember, like years ago when I first started, I would have all these arrows and everything, and there's a lot more cueing.
Yes.
And I still do post that stuff sometimes. It's just the not the meat and potatoes of what I typically do. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's a lot more like structured as far as like, okay, here's how you progress from week 1 to week 2 to week 3 to 4, which again isn't perfect because someone might still need to be on week 1 for 5 weeks. But the idea is like, okay, typically people will progress to this phase at this time. And I think I struggled with that at the beginning because I was doing the one-on-one stuff for so long. And just, I think the way that our brains work of like making everything just like individualized for what someone needs, not generalized. I struggled for like the longest time trying to actually put out programs or routines for people to actually do that they could pay for because I was like, oh, but for this person, it will not be appropriate or this person. But I just realized like, okay, if you could put everybody into a box and there was 100 of them and 80 of them would benefit from it and 20 of them probably not, you're just going to have to do it anyway. And you're going to help a lot more people than not doing it. So
Yep, I agree with you. That's the realization I've come to is like, yeah, we want to ultimately, yeah, if you could evaluate every single person and create something personally tailored for them that matches their impairments and symptoms and how they're responding to an exercise, that's the gold standard. But you do realize after a long time of being on these platforms that putting out something general for a condition that you're educating them on, these are the common symptoms, the person will be like, okay, I think I have tennis elbow based on what he's writing here. Here, if you actually, it's amazing how many people around the world get better from a general set of
even
exercises.
Just from following our posts on Instagram, and just from the random people who reach out, like, "Hey, I followed your page and I was able to get over this thing." Sometimes it's kind of surprising, and those are just people that commented or sent you a message. Like, how many people never told you, but they actually did. But still, it's still sometimes hard for me. Like, how do I put together a program that's going to be the best possible for these people that's still generalized? You know.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I kind of create all these protocols in the book, and the same thing. It's like you're trying to put in enough education to help people tailor it themselves, like kind of like questions like, oh, what if I have pain during this? Or, just the things that patients always ask that help that you use that information to change directions and modify their program. And putting that, you do your best to put it in a resource so people can kind of make those decisions, but it is so tricky. It's kind of like what you said before of like, if I take all the people with this thing and put them in one box, what's a program that would apply to the majority of people with that problem?
Everybody, and you have to actually know that some people it'll probably make them feel worse. Like, not that you want to, but it's just that it can't be individualized to every single person. So what's going to help most people? But I also need to put like disclaimers in there of like, hey, this is not going to be as good as individual. And then I also try to put, especially for the programs, I'll put things like, these are the criteria of these things that typically bother you or you have trouble with. These are things that typically feel better for you. If people look at that and go, oh, that sounds like me, they're probably going to do pretty well with it. And I actually have had a decent amount of people from my app who will go through a program and go, hey, it helped me a lot, but there's these things that still I have trouble with. Can I work with you one-on-one? And that was not my intention, but I think that some people realize like, hey, I need something more individualized. I'm appreciative of this, but some things actually hurt, or some things just didn't feel right, or this got me to a certain point, but I want to go beyond that, which I kind of expected, but it's kind of cool to see that some people can still benefit, but then I can help them more if I work with them individualized. Yeah. So that's kind of cool too.
Totally. Yeah. That's really cool. That's kind of a neat filter for thinking of, is this person a good fit for the one-on-one training? Like they went through the app program and like they want a little bit more. That's probably kind of a cool, like naturally just right away a person that's probably a good fit in a lot of ways.
Or if they say I did this program and it just made everything worse. then I go, okay, well now I know it doesn't work, and that's still helpful information. And the cool thing is, as you know, there's some people who take that the wrong way, like, oh, this program's horrible, blah, blah, and not realizing everything that goes into it, which I understand. They might think like, oh, this is a cure-all for everything, which it isn't. But there's other people where they're almost like self-selecting themselves as a good person to work with, because if they're like, hey, this wasn't the perfect program for me, but I understand why, or I kind of have an idea. Can you help me understand that? Can you do an exam on me? And I'm like, sure. And then we go through it and I go, this is why these things help. This is why these things didn't, based on your situation. This program was not actually perfect for you. For these other people, it might have been, but not for you. And they're like, okay, that totally makes sense. And those people are like, yes, you're going to be someone that's good to work with because you get it. You get that there's nuance here. You get that there's like different things that like it's not this cookie cutter thing for every single person. Yeah.
That's why the education's so important, right? Like nobody reads the post descriptions anymore, I feel
it's
like.
So hard.
The educational part of it is so important because, that's the most amazing patient to have someone like that, a client like that, where they go through and they don't just automatically kind of throw you and your program under the bus. They realize like, oh, there's a lot of nuance to this. And I probably should do like an actual one-on-one with a PT and like have something that's really personally tailored, created for me.
I think ideally what we want is someone who will look at a post or do a program or do a routine or whatever and look at it as like, hey, let's see if this helps. I think I'm going to kind of self-diagnose myself, not as a expert, but like, let me just see if it helps. And if it doesn't help, I'm not going to be like super upset about it. If it does, that's awesome. Or what things can I learn from this that help and other things that don't help? And why is this thing hurt when it's supposed to help with this thing? Oh, maybe because it's too much weight. Or, you know what I'm saying? And if people kind of take it as like a learning experience versus a, well, this guy posted this and it actually made things worse. Or this guy posted this and it doesn't work for me. Or it's like, well, there's probably a lot of reasons why it doesn't, or why if we slightly tweak the exact same exercises, it would work for you, you know? And so I think that's helpful to see. I actually posted today a meme about imaging. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw that one, the earplugs.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for those people who didn't see it, it was like about like how a lot of people think they need to have imaging so that the physical therapist actually knows what to do, because if not, they're just guessing or something. And I've struggled with this for the longest time. Like, how do I make a post on this? And I'm probably going to make other posts that are probably even better worded or something. But most of it was from the caption of what I'm explaining. But the whole point is like, we don't, like, it's helpful for us to have an understanding of what tissue might be irritated or injured or whatever. But at the end of the day, that's not what we're actually helping you with. What we're helping you with is, oh, you lack mobility here. You lack strength here.
Yes.
Oh, how does this affect your life? What function are you not doing well with? And that's what we're treating. Even if it's helpful to know the tissue and how that might play into your prognosis or whatever, the imaging is such a small piece of the puzzle. And it's more important if it's like, this is something that I can't help you with. This is something you need emergency medical attention. Or, you know, this is something I'm only going to get you to this point probably because we can see that this is a full rupture of something and this probably won't heal. But, you know, in some cases it does. So let's still try, you know. So there's so much nuance there that even reading the comments of today's post, I was like, oh my God, like people didn't get it. So I was like, no, a lot of people did, but a lot of people didn't. And they're like, no, I don't agree with you. I'm like, it doesn't matter that you don't agree with me. Like, can you read the caption and understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah.
And they don't even like, they just think, no, I need to get this beforehand. And so that happens with so many different folks.
Nobody reads the caption. No, nobody reads the caption. They just look at the post and just instantly. And I think that's actually changed a little bit over time. I feel like people used to read the captions more. So, but man, the number of times that discussion comes up with patients where it's like, yeah, imaging is it can provide helpful information, but it doesn't really dictate a lot of what I'm doing in physical therapy. Most of my decisions for the treatment plan are based on impairments that we identify, the symptoms you're telling me, your history, like what I find in the evaluation, and you know, that stuff. And of course, like I feel like I'm talking so much with people about all these studies on asymptomatic individuals and how many of these things pop up on imaging that, you know, these are people who are pain free. So it's tricky though. You can understand as a patient, if this isn't your area of expertise, you want to figure out what is the thing causing my pain and how do I fix that thing. And so it's tricky for people, this whole like pain and the difference between like pain and tissue injury not being the same thing. That, you know, it's like a lot of people, most people, right? Like most people think if I have pain, I have a tissue injury and I need to find that tissue injury. And it did it for a second, but it sounds like it's back to normal.
I think another thing is that a lot of people think like, okay, if I didn't get imaging and then I get physical therapy and it didn't help, then I should have got imaging, and that shows that I should have got it beforehand because I didn't know what they were doing. And it's like, well, you could also have people who didn't assess you well enough or didn't give good care, and so it doesn't automatically mean that. In some cases, someone could do everything they're supposed to do and they did the best assessment ever, and you're not getting better, and maybe you should get imaging or a follow-up with an orthopedic surgeon or anybody else that's appropriate in the medical field to kind of do further testing if things aren't making sense. And how are you supposed to know as a patient if it's a good assessment? You don't know. But the idea here is that we can't just assume that like, oh, it's because I didn't get this, that's why I'm not getting better. It's like sometimes it just wasn't the right plan. And so that's something that people have to understand. And I think the other thing I think about is like you said with how people are supposed to know this stuff. They want to find that thing. It's like even as physical therapists, like there's a growth process as a physical therapist in your early years of like trying to understand this stuff and how to give better assessments and how to like make sense of this stuff for people. And like, if it takes us this long to kind of learn this stuff, if you're just somebody who just has like a shoulder injury for a couple of weeks, how the heck are you supposed to like understand all the nuance that goes into this? We've been doing this for years. And so it makes so much sense to us, but someone else is like, no, I just want to know what's going on. It's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I try to explain
Totally.
why, but it's
No,
really
that's
hard.
oh, that's such a good point. Like how many years we've spent, because I've changed so much from where I started as a PT to now, and to expect that, yeah, a patient's going to come in and just grasp those when they come in, or even after
Yeah,
weeks of working with you, you're trying to, it's, yeah, it's that whole, that side. I feel like the longer I've been in this profession, the really kind of like the education and kind of almost the talk therapy side of physical therapy is the part that it's almost probably the area I feel like I needed the most growth in, or maybe the area where I've changed the most over time. You
yeah,
know, it's like in the beginning, I was so focused on, kind of the posture structure,
yeah,
biomechanics, like special testing, all that stuff. And, but also that's a product of the fact that I'm kind of seeing people who just have pain. I don't really see post-surgical anymore
yeah,
or any like even even like really specific traumatic injuries. Most of the people I see these days are just like something's bothering them. They have some
yeah,
pain, and it's kind of so that these kind of conversations just come up more naturally. But yeah, it's man, thank you for being on here
yeah,
today. And I think this part here at the end was awesome. I think for some stuff that for the people out there who have pains and injuries who listen to this. But I am just super excited to hear more about your journey and to hear just kind of this whole content creation online business side. There's so many other questions I could keep asking you about how that's all structured and kind of what that all looks like for you. But I think what you did cover is going to be um, just super helpful for, I know just so many people, this is on their minds, like this whole, like, should I get into content creation? Should I try and see like virtual patients? Should I try and start my own business? And what does it look like to build that? And I think hearing some of those, some of those like variables that have helped you be successful in that area, I think are going to help people who are listening to this. So, um, and then you said a lot of this stuff can be found on your Instagram.
yeah.
What, just so people, and I'll put it down in the show notes. What's your Instagram
It's
handle?
at dr.caleb.burgess. And I think if anybody doesn't have Instagram for whatever reason, yeah, Facebook. I think it's the exact same thing, or it's just all one together, Dr. Caleb Burgess. And then Twitter is, I think, that same thing. And then Threads as well, obviously, is the same, is connected to Instagram. I do have
Oh
YouTube,
yeah.
Tom. I,
You got
well,
YouTube?
hold
You were
on.
on
So
there.
I
I
don't
was
have
wondering.
like, I'm not making long form content like you are,
Oh,
which we've talked about multiple times how I want to do it, and I just haven't done it.
yeah.
But because I
Totally.
can't find the time. But
Yeah.
I basically am just like reposting stuff from my Instagram page or whatever, and I think I almost have like 10,000 people on there just from that, which is kind of cool because I haven't
Wow.
really dedicated really any that much time, just kind of just taking what I'm already making and putting it on there. So
Mm-hmm.
one day I will do that.
Yeah. Heck yeah. No, you're in a trickier spot than me because you see so many patients and clients. You're so busy doing that. Whereas I don't do nearly as much of that as you do. I mean, so much of my focus was on the book
Yeah,
and really has been on kind of content creation. It's like the people who are full time in the clinic and are thinking about taking this on. You're already full time
yeah,
in the clinic, like you
it's
were
so
before,
hard.
and then trying to do this on the side. It's a lot to do. Like it's exhausting, and you're kind of back. I know you're doing so much clinical care. So then to take on and does taking on YouTube even make sense if like I'm a firm believer now, the longer I've been in all this, that for me, I have a certain
Yeah,
bandwidth. And if I add too many things to my plate, I get stressed out and then the quality of
yeah,
everything drops. So I just know like I'm at this point now where it's just like book stuff, podcast,
yeah.
social media. And that's pretty much I do
Which
those
is
three.
good. And
Like
if
that's
it's
what I do.
working well, then you can do a lot with that, and it is. So keep
Hmm.
doing it.
Yeah, but I think everybody you have to figure out that
Yeah,
system, and I mean to think about where we both started and where we are now. I had no idea of any of this in the beginning. You just
yeah,
have to, but you do kind of have to figure out those systems. I think where you can be consistent and just stick with it. And a big part of that is having some experience and knowledge and just like a huge passion for it. And I used to always tell this to students when I was teaching the kinesiology students that there's a lot of I think any profession you go into, especially nowadays with the online space, if you are willing to be creative, you can create something unique for
yeah,
yourself, but you just have to there's definitely like we were talking before, there's definitely a lot of just like work and hustle and kind of grind and stress that goes into it. But I think we're both at a spot now where I wouldn't trade
No.
it for where I started, but you just have to know going into it, it does have those elements and it's a marathon. You got to stick with it for a long
Yeah,
time.
and I don't mean this to come off negative to some people, but to provide the nuance there is like for all the people that you see that are doing like really well with this stuff, there are a lot of people who have maybe tried and it was just too exhausting and they're just like, you know what, I can't do this. And they didn't end up doing it. And I'm not trying to say that like as like a don't try, because the point is like if you do stick with it, you might have a long period of time where things just aren't doing well. And if you can stick with it and
Hmm.
you get to the point where it becomes like a this is your career, that's amazing. But also like it's not going to
Hmm.
come most of the time. It will not be easy. It's going to take like that grind, like you
Yeah.
said. But then if you find out months in that it's just not for you because it is too crazy, like it's not that's not anything to be like ashamed about. It's just it's
Mm-mm.
not for everybody. And sometimes you don't know until you try it.
Yeah,
Hopefully, it didn't come
totally.
off
There's a lot
negative.
of
Like
variables that go
there's a lot of
into
people
it.
that didn't do well.
Yeah, no, no.
Like I,
No, I agree with you. There's so many variables that come into being successful, and sometimes it's just not the right
yes.
time in life. Like you could have young kids or other just commitments and responsibilities in life, and yeah, if something like this doesn't work out for you, there's variables that are there are a lot of things that are outside your control too, and I think it just to me, I've heard people compare it to sort of like the compounding effect of like buying stocks or putting money, investing money. It's like if you can stick with it and keep doing it for a long time, you'll have more and more content, and then that kind of compounds on itself. And you especially see that on a platform like YouTube where an older video will still get
Yeah.
views. Instagram things kind of it's like they have a
Yeah.
shelf life and then they kind of
Then you
disappear
repost
almost.
them
But
in a few months.
yeah, you bring them back again. Exactly. So, but it's definitely there's definitely a lot of kind of hustle and grind and maybe a certain degree of like the obsessive compulsive nature that I feel like a lot of creators have that helps you keep going and stick with it. I mean, I think a lot of people from the outside probably would think you and I, our habits look a little
Oh,
crazy.
totally. They'd be like,
Like
that's
the
just
stuff,
weird. Yeah.
yeah. How often we're kind of checking things,
Yeah.
like the
Like
schedule in the
check the amount of
morning.
time I'm
Like it
on
just,
social media. Like at the end of the day, it'll be like,
oh,
I mean, sometimes it's not very much, but sometimes I'm like, how did I spend that much time? I didn't even realize. Um,
yeah. And I'm not looking at other content. I'm not like on the explore page. I'm literally just doing my
yeah.
content, like full just creation, like responding to
Responding.
people. And I
Yeah.
look at my screen time sometimes, like between all the different platforms and doing things, like it's a lot of
Yeah.
time. I sometimes feel, sometimes I'm like, I got to give my eyes a break.
Yeah.
I got to,
Yeah. Sometimes I get eye
so,
strain just from, and that's the thing is
yep.
like the amount of time that goes into it just for your own stuff. It's like it's
Hmm.
the only time I ever really see other things is if I just open the app and it's the first few and I might just swipe through a
Sure.
couple just because it's like just a habit
Yep.
of like, oh, what's going on? Or if it's like a
Hmm.
sporting thing or
Hmm.
whatever, or like the first few stories I see.
Yep.
But typically it's like it's not really not on social media for my own enjoyment. It's just for
Yes.
me
Yes.
trying to help people or make content or respond to people or whatever. So
It's such a different mindset. Like my wife is only on it for her own enjoyment, and I watch her behaviors, and I'm like, wow, this is like so interesting
it
how
looks
different.
relaxing.
Because that's what most people, yeah, most people are just like taking things in and enjoying it, and that is not what we're doing. So, dude, well, thanks again for
Yeah.
coming on here. I appreciate you taking so much time, just like taking the time out just to even chat with
Yeah.
me. I think it's gonna help a ton of people, and it was it was really fun for me just to get to talk because you and I have known each
I
other
know.
for a lot of
Without ever
years, but it's
talking.
always just these quick little Kirsten always, I don't know what your wife's like. Kirsten's always like, those aren't your real friends, they're your
I'll
Instagram
say
friends. And I'm
things.
like, no, I
That's
really
so
kind of
funny. I'll
like,
say
yeah.
things to my wife sometimes, like, "Oh yeah, I have a buddy in like Virginia, or I have a buddy," and she'll be like, when did you meet them? I was like, well, I mean, I'm like, well, like we follow each
Never
other
really
and
met
like we
them.
talk, and she's like, well, so they're not really your buddy. I'm like, well, they are my. It's like it's this weird world we live in where like even you and me, like I feel like we know each other, but like I've never actually talked to you
Exactly.
until right now. Really, like we really haven't. It's
It's
just
so
we've
weird.
just messaged a
Yeah,
lot or voice message, but it's been for like
exactly.
7 years or something. So it's just this weird
You
world.
see that person's, you hear their
Yeah, I mean,
voice. Yeah,
I
you
only
have
hear your
those little
voice,
like
but your
DMs. You
content,
feel like,
or the quick if you send me a
yes,
quick message, but it's just funny to like actually interact, and then even interacting. not even in person. It's virtually, but
Yeah.
it's like normal
No.
now.
But isn't it
Yeah,
crazy? Like me talking to you today, it matches up with what I feel
exactly.
like I knew about, like your voice and like mannerisms, like who you are. It's really
It's a really,
crazy.
it's a
Like, it's kind
cool
of
thing,
cool in
but
a
a
way. It's
weird
like,
thing that's still hard to kind of wrap
yes,
my head
yes,
around. Is like we
yeah,
feel like and not just you. So many people I know where I'm like, I've never actually met that person. I never even talked to them on the phone, and but I'm like, oh yeah, they're my friend, just because we
yeah,
interact.
exactly.
It's so weird.
All the negative things that are said about social media, I think we're lucky in that we get to live in a pretty positive,
Yeah,
like,
bubble.
I feel like it's mostly positive, and where like our bubble of where we're at, like there's very little negative to me. And then I get to like
Yeah,
you and I get to like meet, like we're friends and get
yeah.
to talk on a podcast like this. It's I don't know, it's pretty
It's
cool.
also cool because
So,
I had someone
but dude,
cancel that we were supposed to end, and I was like, sweet, someone canceled. So that's why I was cool.
oh,
I didn't care. I was like, let's just keep talking because this is fun. And
I was
yeah, I don't want you to
okay,
be
awesome. I
stressed
was
out
getting
about
stressed.
that
I was
because
like, he's probably
I
got something.
actually
Okay,
had a
okay,
call that was
good.
like
Yeah, yeah.
right when we were supposed to end, and I was like, oh, I got to like message them that I'm going to be late, and then I looked and I was like, oh, they rescheduled. So I'm like, okay, we're good.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah,
good. Good. I was like, it's like, and you know how the PT schedule stuff works. I was like, oh, he probably,
yeah,
I was starting to get a little
no,
worried. And it's Friday
yeah,
and be doing stuff with family and
yeah.
everything. So, but man, thanks again for, yeah, taking the time. And, yeah, it's gonna be an awesome episode that's gonna be super helpful to a lot of people. And, yeah, dude, talk to you,
Yeah,
I'll
we'll do
keep
it again. We'll do
probably
it again for
DM
sure
with you.
because
And
we
yeah,
got plenty more to talk about, I'm sure.
yep, yep. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one. Bye.